We are looking at our third and final production of the history of Ruffsdale and Torres and the area around there, as Slick and Shiny tongue-in-cheek productions once again takes us back to those days of yesteryear. And believe you me, things were not always wonderful and pretty back then, especially when you're looking at a coal mining area. Those who people who believe that everything in the old days was great and wonderful should talk to somebody who used to work in the mines. Now this is going past the distillery, Dillinger's distillery in Ruffsdale. That's the Southwest Branch Railroad. This building here is the oldest of the buildings, probably going back to about the 1880s. That's Samuel Dillinger. He's the guy that started it. He had a distillery over in Bethany before he moved the distillery up to Ruffsdale. Also of interest is the fact that Samuel Dillinger was on the board of directors of that railroad that went past there. He was a guy who was one of those local guys who you might describe as a mover and shaker, one of those guys that got stuff done. He was involved in the production of flour, the production of coal and coke, and the production of rye whiskey. He was a Mennonite. They were very hard-working people. This shows the old distillery. In the old days, it shows these tanks. You can see they were not doing things on a small scale. They were making a lot of booze. This is what they were making. And if you read the label carefully, it says up here, 100 proof. And that was not for the teetotalers. 100 proof is not 100%. 100 proof is actually 50%. But that's still a lot of alcohol, and more than you need, really. Now we're looking at the area that we're going to be looking at. What I'd like to comment on is the fact that if we were looking at this area in the 1850s, none of this stuff up here would be here. It would just be all farmland with a little country village down here called Bethany. What we're going to do now, we're going to look at this quarter over here where Ruffsdale now sits. I worked on this to make things a bit clearer. This is the Southwest Branch. And if that railroad had not come through, none of that stuff would be there. This was Dillinger's distillery. Right beside the railroad. Some of these buildings over here also were in that incorporated entity, the distillery. This is what we're looking at over here, right over here. It's called Ruffsdale. Next we'll be looking at things over here. And it's a good lesson in how things change. This is called Central. This is called Ferry. And in a number of years, this will be called Rocktown. This will be called Central. Ferry will not exist anymore. And there'll be a place in here called Snydertown. One of those lessons of history teaches us about how things change. We're looking down from the air in 1939. That was what the previous view was. This is a southwest branch coming through. And a siding from the southwest branch comes off and goes up here. It's one of those things that when you look closely at it, you get a good look at what mines do. They really make a mess out of a place. There were a lot of coke ovens. These were batteries of coke ovens. These were the slate, and these were debris, the bony piles, that the slag that they bring out of the mines and dump. Another surprising thing is how much this area has been cleaned up. If you look at it in present tense, it's amazing. You'd never think all this horrible insult to Mother Nature ever happened. I said this was called Central. And in the same year that this photo was taken, another photo was taken of a guy who worked for Bort's Coal. Bort's Coal was running this from probably the late 20s into when it went out of business in the early 50s. But here's another photo of John Malago. He worked for Bort's Coal. He drove a dinky. This is a little steam engine. It pulled the lorries around. They were the cars that hauled the coal up above the coke ovens and dumped the coal into the coke ovens to be converted. And he's holding his granddaughter, Teresa Zumbo. This is 1939. I think I said that. But when you realize what you're looking at, that little girl, if she were alive today, and she may be, she would be over 80 years old. And we can imagine that her granddad is probably not with us anymore. This is what we're looking at up here. It was called Central. We're going to move down to Torres. We'll be coming in this road here, which is Route 31, approaching the railroad track, which is the red line. This is coming down, going toward Mount Pleasant. You can see the railroad down here. This is the railroad. On this corner, once upon a time, was once the railroad station. Torres had its own railroad station. And also, we're told that Torres was the place where the mine was that supplied all the coal for the engines that worked on the southwest branch going up and down from down in the Connellsville coal and coke region up to the main line up at Greensburg. We're coming down, approaching CNC building supplies over here. Now that's CNC right on the in the middle. This street here is called Hotel Street, and that building does not look like a typical building for a place where they sell building supplies, does it? It doesn't to me. It brings up the question, was this the building that had the hotel that occasioned naming this street Hotel Street? I don't know that. I always like to get local people to talk up because they are the people who actually know much more about these places than I do. I'm just doing a survey of them. I'm not doing an in-depth history. Doing a survey, you look around for places to come back to that might be a good idea to do an in-depth history. We're coming down now. Coming into view is the coal patch, the place where these were houses for the miners. They were built by the mine company. Southwest Mine was a big figure here in the production of coal. It became known as Southwest Connellsville Coal and Coke. This is what we're looking at right here at Torres. Now we're going to see something maybe it was a bit unexpected. There were actually trolleys going through these places. Ruffsdale and Torres used to have a trolley line going through. The black line, the heavy black line, shows the railroad, and beside it is a thin black line. That shows the trolley line. These lines are all trolley lines. It's the same thing. Coming down from New Stanton is a trolley going through Hunker, through Ruffsdale, through Torres, and it'll go the whole way down to Scottdale and beyond. You can also here switch over to one that goes to Mount Pleasant. So if you were living up here and the mine went out of business and you needed to go to work, you could get a job down in Scottdale at the mills or go up to Youngwood and get a job in the railroad yards up there on the trolley. Now we're up at Ruffsdale. This is coming up to the main feature, the railroad. People don't think of that anymore, but it was the railroad that caused this place to be. Without the railroad, Ruffsdale or Torres or any of those places wouldn't exist. Now, the area we were just looking at is up here. We're further down that road now, which is called Church Street. Over here you can see the distillery. That was Dillinger's distillery. That's the end of Church Street down here. There's a church. And we've said about as much as we're going to say. And with Porky and Bugs and company, we say, that's all, folks. Thanks for coming along on the trip. Bye now.